Welcome to Weekly Cheats. I'm Aaron, and after a week of eating clean, it's time for something sweet. Today, what we're going to be making is peanut butter AMAZEBALL truffles. I'll show you how to make the truffle version and what I like to call the lazy version if you don't have enough time or don't feel like trying to invest in it yet. But first, what we need to do is clean our countertop and make sure everything is sanitized. All right, I have tried a bunch of different brownie recipes with this, and the best one that I've been able to find so far is a fudgy brownie recipe that I came across years and years ago in the chocolate edition of Food magazine. It's a stick of butter that we're gonna melt down, and it's 2 cups of, in their recipe, it calls for semi-sweet chocolate, but I like milk chocolate because it's better. And then it'll be 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and 3/4 of a cup of plain sugar while it's in the pan. Then we'll move over to the counter and mix up the rest, and I'll go over that when we get to that point. So this has started to cool down a little bit. Next thing we need to do is get the oven preheating, 325 degrees. Get that going while we get the rest of this. Then we're gonna add 4 eggs, 1 at a time. So, and then just kind of beat them in. If you don't have a tool like this is a batter beater, has little, they're like spatula blades, and this part is also made of the same type of silicone as a spatula, so it makes it so it's really easy to work with. If you don't have one of these, just use a whisk, that's fine. All right, so that's about as mixed up as we need with the eggs. Next, we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of our vanilla. Oop, a little more than a teaspoon. All right, and then lastly, we have 1 cup of flour and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're just gonna mix that in with it. Always have some left over. Of course I'm gonna lick this. All right, what I've got here is my pan, sprayed it, and then I've lined it with some parchment paper so that when we're done, you can just kind of pull them out a lot easier, but you wanna spray the parchment paper so it doesn't stick to the parchment paper too much. This is a 9x13 pan, so not a little 8x8. Oven's preheated. It's gonna go in, again, 325 degrees. It's gonna be 45 minutes. So it takes a little while to bake, okay? When we made our peanut butter truffles and when we made the stuffed Oreos, I was actually doing a half recipe of this because it'll go a long way. With the brownies intact, we're gonna do a full recipe. So it's 2 sticks of butter, a full cup of peanut butter. We're gonna beat this together, and then we'll be adding powdered sugar. Now, like I said at the beginning, I'm gonna show you the lazy way to do this and the full AMAZEBALL way to do this. And for this particular recipe, it's actually about 4 to 4.5 cups of powdered sugar, but I'll show you the difference in consistency that we'll want for each type. So we're gonna split our brownies in half. The first part that we want is to actually have this so that it's spreadable. Okay, if you remember from the earlier videos, which we can put links to on there for the truffles and the peanut butter Oreos, you go till it's almost a cookie dough consistency. That's taking it too far on this one. I actually want it to be a little bit more spreadable, like with a knife, so it would stick to your fingers and everything. So we're not gonna add the full 4 cups. We're gonna go till we get that consistency, and then we'll do our half. We'll spread the half on top of the brownies, and then we'll put powdered sugar in for the rest. Kind of looks like cookie dough before you finish adding all of the flour. It's kind of the consistency that I like to look for in here. So if you're making cookies and you've got roughly 4 cups of flour you're supposed to add, it's roughly at that 2 cup of flour stage or somewhere in there. So it does stick to us, right? But it'll allow us to spread that over the brownies. Okay, so our brownies are all nice and cooled down. So we're just gonna take a spatula and we're gonna get around the edges here to kind of help this separate. We've got our paper on each side, so we should be able to just kind of pick this right up. Ooh, just like that. Now, we can trim the edges off. So, I don't know if you're a brownie person and you like the corners or not. We don't want that for what we're doing here. So I just kind of trim the edges off because they're dry and they get all crumbly and they don't work super great with the next couple steps we're gonna do. For this part, I'm gonna go ahead and just cut this in half. And And we'll say, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put some of this on top. We want it to spread and we want it to stick. It's kind of like sugar cookie frosting. That's what we're thinking about. What we're gonna do now is we're just gonna go through and we're just gonna cut it up into squares. You can cut it up really into whatever size you want. Make sure we're flat. I like to go about 1 inch by 1 inch. This one's kind of a runt, so I'm just gonna test it, you know. Make sure it's good. It's good. So where we're at right now is pretty close. We only need roughly a half cup to get us to the texture that we want for this. And again, this is kind of that peanut butter dough texture that we had in the truffles and the same that we had with the Oreos that we've done. So we don't need a ton of it at this point. And I'll kind of show you, we don't want it to stick to our fingers is really what we're looking for. Why do I have a pan out? Because we're actually gonna freeze these. Just like we did the truffles, we're gonna actually cut these up, roll them into balls, and then we're gonna cover that with the peanut butter dough. We need to freeze it so it doesn't fall apart on us when we go to cover it in chocolate. And as you see, the top is a little crumbly. If it's too crumbly, like depending on your oven, if it dries out the top, you can just scrape that off. We want these nice fudgy brownies in the middle. So I'll kind of work some of this off and then just use that in the center. One thing that's nice about this is if you have a little tiny chunk like that, it's okay because you can add that to your next one. So when I first made the peanut butter truffles, I thought they were delicious. And I was thinking to myself, how can I make these better? And I like brownies a lot. And so initially my first experiment was just this. I just spread it on the top. And then I started to think to myself, is it possible to just encase that brownie in the peanut butter all together and then maybe cover that in chocolate so that it never dries out? The chocolate just makes a perfect shell and they'll stay fresh for a couple of days. Not that they ever last a couple of days, but if I give them away, other people don't eat sweets as much as I do, so I've heard they might last a couple of days. So if you're a normal person like that, you can keep them out on the counter. I don't recommend eating them refrigerated. It's not as good because the peanut butter dough, when it's at room temperature, just the texture and everything, it really opens up the flavor and it just is way better. So I recommend eating them at room temperature. So the next step is to cover this bad boy in some of this. So what I like to do here is kind of work it out like that so it's nice thickness. And I put it on and then I just kind of fold it up around and you just kind of slowly pinch it together, work it into a ball, set it down. On the tray, our spacing doesn't really matter. You just don't want them bumping into each other and freezing together when they're in the freezer. But we'll get more parchment paper out, just like for this, when we take them out of the freezer. They only need a couple minutes, 15 minutes or so in the freezer, just for that butter to freeze, and then you could start working with them. Okay, so these are all ready to go. They're all covered, but I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the freezer, then we'll cover these in chocolate, and then by the time we're done covering these ones, these should be ready to go. Okay, I mentioned in the peanut butter truffles, when we made the first one, that I like Calabay. I've since been told that the Calabay actually goes by Van Leer with their compound chocolate. But the way it sets up with a nice shell so you can pick it up and it doesn't melt all over your hands. And in my opinion, it tastes the best. So I highly recommend this particular chocolate for this, especially when we get into the AMAZEBALL portion where we turn these into truffles when they come out of the freezer. This part's not as important because you're not holding exclusively chocolate. You can pick it up by the brownie, but when we have the entire thing covered in chocolate, that's where the type of chocolate that you use is the most important, and just not having it melt all over you. But there's no point in skimping on ingredients. We're making one batch, whatever. This will last for months. And we'll just microwave this about 20 seconds, 30 seconds at a time so that we don't dry the chocolate out and burn it. Okay, we've got our chocolate all melted down. There are two types of spoons. For this one, we've got our small tablespoons and then our large tablespoons. I like to use a large one for this so I can get a good amount to spoon over it. So just like with our Oreos that we did the other week, just gonna put right over the top and then just press down so it kind of runs over all four edges. So at this point, these need to set up before we do much else. Okay, so I just grab a couple so far, just drop it in there, use the forks, move it around so it gets fully covered in chocolate. Just take out a couple at a time, so I'll usually just put them on a plate. That way they don't have time to sit and thaw before they go in the chocolate. We've got all of these covered. As you can see, we still have a little bit of chocolate. In my younger days, I would just grab a spoon and try to not let this go to waste, but collateral damage. It's just gonna go in the sink. Last finishing stage, as you can see, these are kind of lumpy. These are boring. So the last thing that I like to do is actually drizzle peanut butter fudge over the top of them. Just 1/4 of a cup of peanut butter, and then a cup of our Van Leer by Calibé. With our peanut butter truffles, it was just a nice dark chocolate drizzle, which the dark chocolate is a nice accent. And then with the Oreos, we did white chocolate to kind of complement the cream there. This one, we're just going peanut butter blitz. As you can see, we still have a little bit of peanut butter fudge left over. This doesn't have to be thrown away. What you can do with this is just store this in another smaller bowl, or you can keep it in the same bowl if you want. But this is great on Oreos at any time. So if you like Oreos, this is a way to make them palatable. I don't like Oreos by themselves, but with peanut butter fudge on them, I like Oreos. So you can save that for later. It's great. All right, so we've got them plated now. They're all set up, ready to eat. So let's cut into one or both and see how it looks. But on this side, as I like to say, the lazy version, because it doesn't require nearly as much work as this side. The lazy version, they still taste great, much easier and quicker to make. But this one, if you really want to wow people, this is the one that you make, the AMAZEBALL. If you like this recipe, go ahead and subscribe. Make sure you give me a comment or a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do and hit the notification icon so you get notified whenever we post a video on Thursdays at noon Eastern. Also, go to Instagram, follow Weekly Cheats. If you make this recipe, go ahead and tag us, Weekly Cheats, in the image, and then come back to the YouTube video here and comment your Instagram handle so I don't miss it. Whoever can make these the closest to how I made them or make their best improvements, I'll feature in next week's video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this recipe as much as I do. Here's a look at the submissions for last week's recipe, Alice Springs chicken.